Chapter 21. 2 days after Hortense's wedding, the militia was alerted. Word spread that English troops were marching on Fort Duquesne, a western outpost which the French had no intention of abandoning. Hearing the news, walking through streets astir with soldiers, Miriam's first thought was of Hortense, who must see her bridegroom march away so soon. It was supper time when she returned to the tailor's shop, and saw to her astonishment the familiar Duquesne carriage, almost filling the narrow street in front of her door. The footman climbed down as he saw her coming, and judging by his ill humour, he must have been waiting for some time. "I was told by Madame Duclos to bring you at once. Get in quickly. There'll be trouble enough for this delay." At the Duquesne residence a state of emergency was apparent. The muslin dress that had fitted Félicité so perfectly on May Day could not be persuaded to fasten tonight. Within the next 2 hours, a troublesome alteration must be completed. No one inquired whether or not Miriam had had supper. She was set to work at once in the well-remembered white and blue room. Félicité hurried back from her own dinner too impatient to stay far from Miriam's side. She was much too excited to remember the old grudge that lay between them. She had to talk to someone, and her silvery chatter was as breathless as ever. "The most divine man, truly, Miriam. The most handsome man you ever saw. Think of it. So young and captain of that great ship. Can't you pull the waist just a tiny bit tighter? Oh dear, if only I hadn't eaten that whole box of meringues. But all the men kept bringing me these boxes straight from France, and I just can't leave them alone." The moment Madame Duclos entered, all illusion of the old days vanished. Félicité knew enough to keep silent. Miriam might have been invisible for all the notice they took of her. Madame was out of sorts. "I'm not sure you are being wise, Félicité," she said once, without even as much caution as she would have observed before the kitchen maid. "We know nothing at all about this young captain." "Oh, maman," Félicité protested. "I'm not going to marry him. His ship sails back in a week or so, and I'll never see him again. Besides, I'll be settled and dull soon enough." "Certain people," Madame reminded her meaningfully, "cannot be provoked too far. I hope you know what you are doing." Félicité's curls tossed. "Certain people have been much too independent lately," she answered. "You leave that to me, maman. I know exactly what I am doing." When Félicité had finally tripped out of the room in the newly fitted dress to join her handsome captain, Miriam gathered together her thread and scissors and went on her way home. Madame was nowhere to be seen, and it was futile to wait for any payment tonight. The street was dark as she hurried nervously along, and she shrank against the wall as a noisy group of soldiers and girls crowded her off the pavement. They were well past her when one of the group glanced back, stared for a moment, and abruptly left the others. As he came closer, she recognized Pierre, his uniform pulled carelessly open at the throat, his black tricorn teetering on the back of his rumpled head. "Miriam, is it you? Parbleu, girl, what are you thinking of to be out on the street at this hour?" "I am on my way home," Miriam faltered. "I did not realize it was so late." "Don't you know that the troops are marching in the morning? Every sober citizen in Montreal will stay inside and lock the door tonight." "Madame had some work for me to do. It is just finished." "Drat the woman! What sort of works? I couldn't wait." "I have told you I am a dressmaker. Félicité's gown needed to be fitted in a hurry. I'm going home directly now." "Un moment. This gown. Why must it be fitted in such a hurry?" "Why—" All at once she saw how she had blundered. Would she never learn to hold her tongue? "To be worn tonight by any chance?" "Pierre, I don't—" "Answer me!" His fingers bruised her arm. "Yes, she wore it somewhere tonight." "The little weasel. Sick in bed with a headache, was she? On my last night!" The black anger gathered in him like a terrifying wave. "Please, Pierre, if you will let me by, I must get home." As she tried to pull away from his grasp, he noticed her again. "I will see you home," he said automatically, hardly aware of what he said. "You don't need to, if you will just let me—" "Stop your chattering and come along." She hurried to keep step with him, thankful to be moving in the right direction. She had merely her own clumsiness to blame for this, she knew. She had been fearful ever since she had met Pierre of provoking the violence that lurked beneath the gay surface. Tonight she was too tired to cope with it. She was impatient when, after a few steps, he halted again. "Wait, I have thought of something." With his grip on her arm, she waited uneasily while he weighed this something in his mind. Once again, in the darkness, his face reminded her of an Indian's. His eyes, glinted under lowered lids, looked reckless and crafty. "So you work for Madame Duclos," he said at last, in a deceptively casual voice.
I might have put two and two together. My mother has been in a frenzy to know where those new gowns have been coming from.
I shouldn't have let it slip out. I promised not to tell.
Well, my good mother is going to find out right now. We will stop and tell her, and from now on, my little seamstress, I promise you more business than you can handle.
Not tonight, Pierre. Tomorrow morning, perhaps. No one wants to talk about dressmaking tonight.
I want to talk about it, Pierre said roughly. Come along.
Was there no way to escape him? Was he drunk like the other soldiers whose tipsy shouts filled the streets? Miriam was too inexperienced to tell. And why this talk of dressmaking when he could barely hold in leash his jealous fury? To cross him now would be foolhardy. Better to humor him and, if she could, deliver him safely into his mother's hands and make her escape. Indeed, she had little choice. He was hurrying her till her breath came in tight gasps along the moonlit street, down a garden path into a side doorway. Pierre, I am sure this is not your house. I will not— Too late she understood his trickery. The door opened directly into a long drawing room. There was a dazzle of lights and voices, and the sound of violins. Behind her she heard the door click shut. She stood frozen. The room whirled in a great coloured pinwheel, and a roaring in her ears shut out the music. Her forehead felt cold. She must actually have lost her balance, for she was aware of pain in her arm as Pierre held her to her feet. The faintness passed. As her sight cleared, two figures emerged from the mass and came toward them, a woman as haughty as a queen, and an elderly man with heavy snow-white hair and a black velvet coat. The woman's voice was sharp.
Pierre, what are you doing here in those clothes? My dear maman, where is our hostess? I have brought a distinguished guest to our party.
Pierre, you have been drinking.
The idea. Maman, grandpère, allow me to introduce my guest. Madame's horrified gaze swept over the trembling girl.
Who is this girl? Pierre, have you lost your mind? Félicité is here.
So I understand.
Madame Laroche came closer. Hush, Pierre. I will not tolerate this. You must get away before the others see you. But the damage was done. In the whole long room there was suddenly not a voice. The roaring began again in Miriam's ears, and from a great distance she heard a man's voice, deep and kind.
My dear mademoiselle,
said the man in the black velvet coat, and incredulously she saw that he was bowing to her.
Allow me to bid you welcome, but I did not catch your name.
Willard. She forced her lips to shape the word. Miriam Willard. And with the name the whirling pinwheel slowed to a stop. Willard, she repeated, half aloud, and it was like a draught of water, cold and strengthening. Her shoulders straightened, her head lifted. She could hear the music again. Pierre turned to her.
Shall we dance?
He asked mockingly. Miriam drew a steadying breath. It was like that moment on the shore at St. Francis, when she had known she must run the gauntlet. A pathway cleared in the room, and they waited to see what she would do. She glimpsed Madame Ducresne and Félicité, her face shocked to a blankness like a painted doll's. Suddenly a gust of anger shook her, a fury as deadly as Pierre's. Who were these people anyway? These beruffled, sophisticated creatures who behaved like savages. Not one of them had ever faced an Indian gauntlet. Not one of them had ever done an honest day's work in return for the food that ruined their fashionable figures. She was through with standing in awe of them, of meekly holding silent, and flattening herself invisible against muddy walls. Never again, no matter what it cost her, would she wait humbly for their favor. She despised them, every one of them. Her head went up. Two brilliant spots of color flared in her cheeks. Deliberately she turned and laid a hand on Pierre's shoulder. "If you wish," she said icily, "by all means, let us dance." Her feet, in the leather sandals, had not forgotten the minuet. The slender calico figure moved with grace among the satins. Amid powdered curls, the smooth, chestnut-red wings of her hair glowed like candlelight. Any ripple of amusement that might have begun was shriveled by the blazing scorn in her grey eyes. As the dance ended, she faced a completely sobered partner. "Now," she demanded imperiously, "you will kindly see that I get home at once." At the door, the elder Monsieur Laroche intercepted them.
"My grandson scarcely deserves the honor of seeing you home," he said. "I have ordered a carriage for you." He bowed very low over her hand. "We have been honored, mademoiselle. You are a very beautiful and gallant young lady. If your English soldiers show half your spirit in battle, we French will have no easy victory."
for some time.
I was told by Madame Duclos to bring you at once. Get in quickly. There'll be trouble enough for this delay.
At the Duchess' residence, a state of emergency was apparent. The muslin dress that had fitted Félicité so perfectly on May Day could not be persuaded to fasten tonight. Within the next 2 hours, a troublesome alteration must be completed. No one inquired whether or not Miriam had been captain of that great ship. Can't you pull the waist just a tiny bit tighter? Oh dear, if only I hadn't eaten that old box of meringues. But all the men kept bringing me these boxes straight from France, and I just can't leave them alone. The moment Madame Duclos entered, all illusion of the old days vanished. Félicité knew enough to keep silent. Miriam might have been invisible for all the notice they took of her. Hearing the news, walking through streets astir with soldiers, Miriam's first thought was of Hortense, who must see her bridegroom march away so soon. It was supper time when she returned to the tailor's shop, and saw to her astonishment the familiar Duclos carriage, almost filling the narrow street in front of her door. The footman climbed down as he saw her coming, and judging by his ill humour, he must have been waiting. Chapter 21. 2 days after Hortense's wedding, the militia was alerted. Word spread that English troops were marching on Fort Duquesne, a western outpost which the French had no intention of abandoning. Had supper. She was set to work at once in the well-remembered white and blue room. Félicité hurried back from her own dinner too impatient to stay far from Miriam's side. She was much too excited to remember the old grudge that lay between them. She had to talk to someone, and her silvery chatter was as breathless as ever. "The most divine man, truly, Miriam. The most handsome man you ever saw. Think of it. So young,